Every belief system eventually collides with one of the hardest questions of human existence, and it usually appears not in philosophy books but in the most personal, painful moments of life. If God is merciful, why does a child suffer? Why do natural disasters wipe out entire communities? Why does injustice so often go unpunished? These questions aren't theoretical, they are real, raw, and immediate. They appear in hospital rooms, at gravesides, or in the silence of prayers that seem to go unanswered. They emerge in moments when life itself feels unfair, cruel, and incomprehensible. For some, these experiences lead to doubt, even despair. People ask themselves, if there is a God, why does he allow such pain? Some conclude that suffering is proof that God doesn't exist, or that life is fundamentally meaningless. Others try to reason through it, suggesting that suffering exists because humans are free. Freedom, they argue, without consequences would be meaningless. If every choice we make had no impact, if every action were free from consequence, what would freedom even mean? Yet, even this perspective doesn't fully answer the question. Not all suffering is the result of human choice, and not all pain is punishment. Sometimes suffering is a tester process through which strength, patience, or wisdom is developed. Other times, it's the ripple effect of collective human actions across generations. Wars, greed, negligence, and violence often create suffering that is then mistakenly attributed directly to God, when in reality, it is the natural outcome of human decisions interacting with an indifferent universe. Nature itself is neutral. Hurricanes don't ask permission, diseases don't negotiate, and earthquakes don't distinguish between innocence and guilt. The universe operates according to laws that are blind to human notions of fairness. Still, there is a deeper, more challenging truth. A world without suffering would also be a world without growth. Without discomfort, there can be no courage. Without loss, no empathy. Without struggle, no moral responsibility. The very qualities that make humans resilient, compassionate, and wise are forged in the crucible of difficulty. Pain doesn't have to be proof against God. It can be a reminder that life is fragile, interconnected, and complex. Consider this: when a person overcomes hardship, their perspective, patience, and strength often grow in ways that comfort alone could never produce. When communities rebuild after disaster, they discover solidarity, compassion, and innovation they didn't know existed. When someone forgives a grave injustice, they tap into a moral courage that transforms not just themselves, but everyone around them. In this sense, suffering can be the hidden teacher of virtues that shape the human soul. Human history itself is full of stories that demonstrate this truth. Think of those who survived wars, famines, or oppressive regimes. Their suffering was immense, yet it led to extraordinary acts of courage, empathy, and creativity. Art, literature, philosophy, and even science have often been born out of struggle. Pain, in its many forms, has forced humanity to confront the limitations of the world and, in doing so, to expand the possibilities of life. This perspective doesn't make grief easy, and it doesn't erase the pain of loss. No philosophical reasoning can take away the emptiness left by a loved one's passing or the terror of a sudden disaster, but it does invite a shift in perception or question. Not only of why me, but what can this teach me, and how can I respond? Perhaps the real struggle is not understanding why suffering exists at all, but understanding why we often expect a meaningful life to be free of difficulty. Suffering also reminds us of the limits of human control. We often assume we can plan, predict, and perfect life, yet misfortune shows us that life is fragile. This fragility, however, is not a flaw, it is the very context in which courage, kindness, and resilience become meaningful. If life were perfectly safe, if hardship never arrived, the very acts of bravery, empathy, and generosity would lose their significance. The fact that these virtues are often born in the midst of adversity gives them depth and purpose. Religion, philosophy, and psychology all offer insights into this paradox. Many spiritual traditions describe suffering as a pathway, a test, or a teacher. Islamic theology, for example, often frames trials and hardship as a means to refine the soul, to cultivate patience, sabr, and to deepen faith. Buddhism sees suffering as an essential part of existence, teaching detachment, mindfulness, and compassion. Even in secular frameworks, psychologists emphasize that adversity can strengthen character, improve coping skills, and build resilience. Across all these perspectives, the lesson is clear. Suffering, while painful, is never meaningless. This doesn't mean that we should passively accept injustice or avoid helping those who suffer. On the contrary, recognizing the role of suffering should inspire action. When we understand that human choices often create preventable suffering, we are morally obligated to act to reduce pain where we can and to alleviate the burdens of others. Compassion and action become not just ethical duties, but responses to the very reality of life's fragility. In the end, suffering may be inevitable, but our response defines us. We can succumb to despair, blaming the divine or the universe, or we can seek growth, understanding, and compassion even amidst pain. In that sense, suffering is not the opposite of faith. It may be one of its greatest tests, and, paradoxically, one of its deepest teachers. So the next time life feels unbearably unfair, perhaps the question isn't, where is God? But how can I find purpose, resilience, and meaning in the midst of this trial? In this light, suffering ceases to be only a punishment or proof against God and becomes a profound mirror, reflecting the complexity, responsibility, and potential of human existence. It reminds us that life is not meant to be simple or comfortable, but that its challenges are what allow us to grow, connect, and transcend the limitations of our own experience. Pain may be universal, but so is the capacity for courage, empathy, and transformation. And in that paradox lies a truth that has echoed through human history. Life is difficult, but in difficulty, we discover what it truly means to be alive.